A very good evening, good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are listening to us. This is Corporate Chronicles Beyond Suits and Cares. I am your host, Emma. Now, this episode is going to be a bit interesting. And it's going to be a bit interesting coming from where we are as a country, Kenya, from what happened last week, some things that were said in public that did not really go down well with people. But even apart from that, before we started releasing these episodes of Corporate Chronicles, we did a survey and we put out questions on what topics do you want to listen from us. And over 1,000 responses, 68% said that sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, at some point, I thought, oh my God, what did I put myself into? But, it said when you put something out in the universe, the universe conspires to support you. And so when I was doing my usual rounds on LinkedIn, I met Kate. Kate is going to be our wonderful guest today. Kate is doing some work around the sexual harassment in the workplace. And I want Kate to introduce herself and tell us who she is, and then we get into it. Kate, karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Emma. Very good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever the listeners are tuning in from. My name is Kate Nderu. I am Head of People, Culture and Change at Nightwise Human Capital. We are an HR firm, and I am an HR practitioner, and I'm very, very passionate about this particular topic of sexual harassment. And my passion has driven me to actually do work that is going to be impactful for this country, for different people, in the legal space, the business leaders, and the HR practitioners as well.
Oh, thank you, Kate. How long have you been in this industry, and how long have you been doing the work around this topic?
Yes, so I'm in my 13th year in 2023 of practicing HR. I've been a generalist all through. I've been enjoying being a generalist and not just specializing in one particular field. As far as the workplace sexual harassment goes, we are in the 3rd year, and this was driven from the needs. Once we interacted with businesses and organizations, we saw it as a need. So we're really trying to address a need that's emerging in the market.
Kate, it really shocked me that 1,000 is a big number, and having 68% of people responding, they want to be talked to about sexual harassment in the workplace. It got me aback a bit because I really did not think, okay, well, maybe I know it happens, but just, the juju, I never really thought that it's such a big deal.
It is such a big issue, and more often than not, it's unspoken of. And we'll be delving a little bit more as the conversation goes to see why a lot of people keep quiet about what they experience. So the motivation for me personally was, in the HR office, we get these complaints, and initially it was just like, oh my God, what do? You just want to get it out of your to-do list as quick as possible. But then with more clarity and with the enactment of the Employment Act, there was a section that was added that sexual harassment should now be prioritized in terms of having a policy. So this kind of, the conviction kept growing. But in my cases that I've dealt with, the key thing that kept coming out is there is actually a cultural thing that kind of influences sexual harassment in the workplace in Kenya. Our societies, our tribes, think of all the 44 tribes. We are a very paternalistic society, and there is this problem that influences workplace sexual harassment, believe it or not.
What?
Yes. You can imagine someone has been sexually harassed and their culture tells them that the man is always right. Whatever the man says, they should respect. So where would that person go to say that, oh my God, my dignity has been infringed? So that was the biggest kind of aha moment that got us to actually sit and say, we need to do something about it. And most of it is around awareness.
Like, Kate, are you telling me that when you go to report the people who are told that what the man says is always right?
Yes, and some cannot even report because they're saying, this is a man, I cannot report. If I do, I'm risking him losing his job, so his family will be affected. All that guilt tripping that we do around when someone's wrong and we don't want to hold them accountable. Why are you reporting? You're the one who's making people lose their jobs. So this is also a big, big problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
This topic for me is completely new, by the way. I tried to do some research. I was like, where? It also requires a lot of psychological support, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
From your research or from the work that you've been doing, what is the current state of awareness and understanding regarding this area in Kenya? And what do statistics look like?
So statistically, the world over, women tend to be the most victims of sexual harassment. But what I would like to probably highlight, and this has kind of also been prevalent, it's the power dynamic. It still tends to be the biggest problem or the biggest opportunity for the perpetrators to kind of exploit this workplace sexual harassment. And this is around the seniority. Somebody who has control over your performance appraisal, for example. And if you want a good appraisal, then you might have to yield to their sexual advances. If you want that promotion, you might have to yield to that drink that they're inviting you to, which you don't want to go to because you probably know it will end up being a sexual advance or a request for a sexual favor. So that has been prevalent in a very small fraction, and it's not to be ignored as well. The power dynamic has equally shifted, where we have more women in leadership in Kenya, and thanks to all the women empowerment initiatives. So we're also seeing the men being sexually harassed. So this is an emerging trend. And the biggest hindrance here is the men are not reporting. They will not report that they're being sexually harassed because of the macho they're supposed to carry around in their ego. And yeah, when you mwanaume jikaze, I hope all your listeners understand Kiswahili, but mwanaume ni kujikaza. That's a big hindrance. But we have also seen an emerging trend where men are also becoming victims of sexual harassment in the workplace.
Wow. I saw a thread running sometime on X, and it was something that a young boy had said the boss was giving sexual advances, and I saw some men there saying whatever you've just said, mwanaume ni kujikaza. And for those who don't understand Swahili, it means that a man needs to be strong. Like you cannot. It's just the masculinity, and I don't know. We have sons, so.
Mm-hmm.
Where do these men run to? It's something that we're going to talk about when you're talking about the support. But when you talk about the trends and the patterns, you have noted that men are now being sexually harassed as well, or sexual advances. I don't know if that is the right word. Have the numbers for the women gone down?
Unfortunately not. Well, women are still the biggest victims, or let's just call it that they are the women are now more brave to report. This could also be a likelihood, but even in the current survey that we're running as at this time, just a few minutes ago, I checked, and we have 206 respondents, and 60% of those are still women. So you can see even the uptake of the survey that's currently live, the women are more responsive to it. And I can only imagine that the men are thinking this is a women problem. We don't need to be attending to this. Hiyo ni shida ya wamama, translated to that's a women issue, which we should not be paying attention to. So women are still bear the brand, but it could also be because of this reporting challenge that we have with the men.
And in your line of work, have you noted any specific industries or organizational structure where sexual harassment appears to be more prevalent?
I wouldn't narrow it down to an industry or sector. What I do see is this power dynamic issue where it's a senior manager who's harassing the juniors. That's been prevalent across all industries and sectors. And if you think about it, there was also a survey that was done by legal interns, and this issue of sexual harassment came out during their pupillage. When they're doing their pupillage, they are sexually harassed. And every time this random conversation, it does come out that the interns are really being sexually harassed. And this points to the power dynamic. This person who's going to sign off on your papers to take back to school to say that you did your pupillage or you did your internship has that power over whether you're going to get a sign off or not. So the power dynamic issue has been the consistent, but I would say the sexual harassment problem cuts across all industries and sectors in Kenya. There was a BBC documentary in the tea farms that was so jaw-dropping, and that's in agriculture, and that's away from the legal fraternity. So I wouldn't narrow it down to a particular sector. What has been consistent is where there is someone in seniority, then they intend to be the perpetrators to the juniors.
And at this point, I just feel like telling anybody who, you do those things for people to get a signage, what a big shame. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around it, because as I said when we were starting, when you put something out in the universe, it conspires to bring you all that information. And on this podcast, we're going to sit with someone who has gone through it. And also I got to talk to also one lady who faced this thing, and I was asking her, because it's also a new area to me. I was asking her, why didn't you report? And she told me, to where do you report? How do you even say it? So Kate, maybe you can tell us some of the challenges in reporting. People don't want to report it. Is it that they don't know? Is it shame? What have you found out?
Yeah, so one big problem is the employers are not creating this psychological safety in handling of sexual harassment cases. There is the confidentiality issue that's being breached. There is the people fear of losing your job. In the current survey that we are running, we're seeing majority people are saying, why didn't you report? That's actually a question. And they're saying fear of losing my job. So that safety around that, if you report, it will be investigated and there will be no retaliation. That's a gap that most employers have. And in our work, we actually try to support organizations to make their mechanisms more robust. The other challenge is most are doing these investigations internally, and more often than not, they are compromised. Because remember, the perpetrator more often than not is a senior person who has probably power, a sphere of control over this process. So then the independence of that investigation tends to be compromised. So outshoring this investigation to private investigative agencies, law firms also do this, HR firms do these kind of investigations, would be advisable, because what that does, it just brings in that independence of that process. Because sometimes they want to, people are looking at it, the organizations are looking at this as a shameful thing, but it's actually not, and it shouldn't be. It's just that if there's a problem, it should be addressed.
Yes, it should be addressed. And I also remember asking one HR person about it, and I remember her saying, but these people they'll come dressed this way, they'll come dressed that way. Yes, I will dress this way or that way, but you have no right to do those things, isn't it?
Exactly. I do have a freedom of choice. protected by the Constitution in my Bill of Rights that my dress code should not be something that I am discriminated on against. Yeah.
And what do you think organizations can do to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace? I know you've said about creating a support for reporting, but is that it, Kate? Is there anything else?
No, that's only one thing that you can do. So a lot of organizations have a whistleblowing mechanism, and this is kind of geared towards fraud. So my advice is broaden the scope of your service provider of the whistleblowing platform to cover sexual harassment as well. And this would encourage the reporting, and especially where there is risk of not reporting because you don't trust that the process will be investigated in a due process manner. The other thing is carry out sensitization trainings. And what this would do, you see this lady who's saying about dress code. These sensitization trainings will actually communicate to the people that you actually have a very diverse workforce with diverse preferences, that you should respect these people based on how they dress, how they present themselves. That's not an opportunity for you to, as a perpetrator, to instigate sexual harassment just because somebody came to the office with a miniskirt, or the man came with a tank top that's showing their six pack. These sensitization trainings really just push that narrative that we're in a work environment. This is what is acceptable conduct. The innuendos, the jokes, those are not acceptable, and they could actually lead to sexual harassment. So sensitization trainings is another way, another mechanism. And the third and final mechanism is the policy. And this policy ought to be robust in its definition of what sexual harassment is. And your definition as a law firm, it ought not to be the same if you have people sparsely distributed in Kenya, working in Kenya. It should cover the entire ground and should be oriented towards your core business. Then the scope of that should also cover not just staff, because you're also seeing sexual harassment from third parties, like customers, for example, or suppliers. And as an employer, you actually do have an obligation to protect your staff against this. So your policies ought to be robust to cover this, to cover definition, to cover the reporting mechanisms. They should outline the recourse actions if one is found to be culpable of sexual harassment. What are the likely consequences? The retaliation and retribution of those who report and found culpable, and witnesses as well, because the protection should also extend to the witnesses, because most of the cases, when you witness somebody being sexually harassed, you're like, okay, I don't want to be involved in this, because if the victim is afraid of losing their job, imagine someone who's witnessed it. So they won't come forward to support your case. And so the evidence issue becomes very thorny for you to prove, because the burden of proof is on the victim, unfortunately. The scope of the policy should also cover not just the physical premises, the brick and mortar, because of remote working, that also ought to be covered there. And also when you're outside the office, because some of these sexual harassment incidences happen during your retreats, when you're going for your team buildings or you're going for a conference, and that coverage also ought to be covered in your policy. So very robust policy is the final mechanism that I would advise employers to kind of support their war against sexual harassment in the workplace.
In fact, you've said something about external parties. You know, at first I hadn't really thought, I don't know, for some reason I just thought it was internal until I started doing some work and listening to some people. And that one for external stakeholders is quite high, because you're a place you have, let's say, just an example, you are supposed to be bringing in sales numbers. And the only way you can bring in sales numbers is this guy tells you 1, 2, 3, or this mama tells you 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness, Kate. It's so I don't know. And from the HR point, from your surveys and from your research in this topic, now that you've been doing it for some time, do these policies the policy that you're recommending, how can we cater for the external, the stakeholder?
Yeah, so it's a bit a very problematic one, because you can imagine this sale that you want to get, and it's one of your biggest revenue earner. You will find that you might need to involve now, like the police, for example, because we do have these protections. Like, for example, each police station has a gender desk. So if you have an internal security team, you want to rope them in to have the police also involved, because you really don't have any span of control over third party. So that's always the advice. Collaborate with the security teams to involve the police in such cases, because if you need to access, for example, data, you definitely need police support for that.
I'm not sure about our police, but I would really hope that, there are those things you put you say, what if it was my daughter? What if it was my mother? Because I feel a type of way about our police service. I am not saying they don't do their work, but I hope they can be able to support such things. Now, Kate, when we talk about the legal and compliance aspects of this issue, as an employee or as someone who could be a victim, what is it that I need to know about the law? What does the law say? How does it protect me? What does it say about my employer? What should I know?
Yeah. So actually, Emma, on the issue with police, I just want to, and here I am, I'm very optimistic, and I probably have good experiences, but the Sexual Offences Act is what created that gender desk in any police station. And they actually tend to be quite responsive, and especially if there's been sexual based violence. And this is one of the crimes that's actually taken very seriously in this country. If you remember, a couple of months back, I guess, a company was involved in a scandal where they were inspecting the sanitary towels. And you can see how fast they moved to go and arrest, because that's a very indignifying act. And so there is hope, Emma. We may not be very successful with a lot of things, but sexual offenses in this country are carried with quite a lot of weight. And I can see that with a lot of conviction. And fortunately, the sexual harassment tends to be in that arena as well, albeit on the minor side. When it gets to the violence and rape, there's a lot of weight given to these issues. I now forget your question. What was your question initially about the law?
At least you're optimistic, and you have there's one time there's a person in my circle who does a lot of campaigns for these things, and I remember one time she went to report, and ndio aliwekwa ndani. She's the one who was arrested because she was told about incitement and all those things. But if there's hope, thank you for being optimistic. Now, I wanted to ask you, I was asking you about the legal and compliance aspect. What is it that I need to know as a potential victim? What is it that the employer needs to know? What is it that we need to know? How does the law protect us when it comes to sexual harassment?
Yeah, okay. So your protection as a citizen, as an employee or a citizen of this country, your protection starts all the way from the Constitution of Kenya that we enacted in 2010. And in Article 27, the equality and freedom from discrimination, equally the Article 28 on human dignity. That's where it all starts. More specifically, when you're an employee, in the Section 6 of the Employment Act, there's protections for each employee to be working in a place free of sexual harassment. And it also explicitly guides employers around the policy, what it should have, the definitions, the protections, and reporting and investigations and confidentiality of sexual harassment incidences in the workplace. The Sexual Offences Act, Section 23, does protect employees on the issue of the power dynamic, especially where senior people are harassing juniors. So Sexual Offences Act kind of hints that no person in authority ought to be harassing or make sexual advances to juniors that they supervise, and this also extends to the public offices. There's also OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Act. This protects, Section 8 protects you against discrimination against employees, and this tends to lean on the psychological discrimination, which kind of infers when sexual harassment has happened, you do have that right to work in a safe environment. I hope that kind of gives the protections, but in the more practical sense. So the reporting, if internal mechanisms have failed, you do have the opportunity to go to the police. And if you do not trust the police, then there's the human rights organizations. And there are quite a few institutions working in this arena. It's in the sexual-based violence arena, and sexual harassment would be covered under that. But if it does go to the extent of rape, please report to the police, and they will collect your DNA and evidence to support your case. But do not be afraid, especially if it has gotten to the point of a rape. That's something that you should not just let slide anymore.
It's quite, I don't know what I'm feeling. I feel like it's quite deep. It needs a lot of time to actually even understand, because all these acts, the Employment Act, sexual offences, OSHA, Bill of Rights, those are things I think people need to educate themselves about. Now, Kate, about the support systems. What resources, support systems, especially after it has happened, or during maybe that time that you know the case is there, because sometimes especially in an office, you report such a thing and now there's investigations. Let's be honest, you'll not have a very good time. And after the psychosocial support, are there any support systems in this country?
There are, and most of them are housed in a lot of non-profit organizations that do interventions around sexual-based violence. They have group therapy sessions, and they also provide psychosocial support. So it's important for employers to also extend this to the victims, because it's not a very pleasant thing to go through sexual harassment, and perhaps if it's been continued. And even when you report and you're thinking, oh my God, this was also some interesting emerging trend in the survey that's currently live, that why didn't you report? That I felt sorry for him. I felt sorry that he would lose his job. I felt sorry. You can see the guilt. That's the victim. What is the right word? I know there's a word for it, where you feel bad for the perpetrator, but you still won't get justice for yourself. So that has been quite an aha moment for us, and for you to know that you actually should not be feeling sorry, and you should love yourself a little bit more, and that you're deserving of a workplace free of sexual harassment. That would come from an awareness point of view. So the support mechanisms to get you to be that energetic self, that person in pursuit of the greatness that you're after as a person.
Okay. I should have even warned my listeners that you need a cup of coffee, because this is quite heavy. And Kate, is there hope? Like, what does the future look like when it comes to the sexual harassment in the workplace?
There is hope. We are actually trying to investigate what the prevalence of this problem in different sectors by age group, who's more affected. And this is all geared towards, putting that data in front of the relevant people, whether it's the legal fraternity, whether they need to enhance the Employment Act, enhance the Sexual Offences Act to give more protections, to give more emphasis on the reporting and the witness protection. So there is hope, and a lot of employers are actually coming to the awareness that this is something that you can no longer sweep under the rug. So we get quite a lot of inquiries for sensitization training. So prevent before you get yourself to the point where you need to correct a problem.
Prevent. That's your message to the employer.
Yes, it is.
To the employee.
To the employer. Mostly
to the employee now. What's your message to the employee?
To the employee, you do deserve a workplace, a dignified workplace to work, a workplace free of sexual harassment, and you are deserving, and you deserve to be heard should you experience it. Don't be afraid to bring forth these concerns, and if you're afraid, find out if someone else is going through the same, because there's power in numbers. And the final thing is that you're the first line of defense. If someone's giving you compliments that you do not appreciate, you have the right to tell them that I don't like you complimenting me. I don't like you sending me messages at night. I am married, I have kids, and I am happily married at that. So you're the first line of defense as far as sexual harassment is concerned.
Let me tell you a story. There's one person I know, and we were having coffee at some point, and out of the blue, she just said that the way her boss, sends her messages at around 1 a.m. In my head, I didn't think that could result to sexual harassment. I just thought that boss is mentally unwell. I hadn't thought about it that way.
What messages could you probably be sending me at 2 a.m., Emma?
I think I was naive. Yeah, what? Like, really, what? Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway, okay. There's something else that I wanted to ask about. You said there's hope, but apart from the men now facing quite a number of men facing sexual harassment in the workplace, have you realized any other trends? Because now I can see social media guys are going to social media. Is there any other trend that you have observed and that we should look out for?
Yeah, so the other trend is that the reporting, the organizations are not safe. People don't feel the organizations are safe to report to. So that's why they will go to Cyprian Nyakundi and Alai when he used to do it to report these issues. And the other emerging trend, Emma, is, the workplace has really changed. It's no longer just direct employment. There's also the issue of secondment to organizations. If you're outsourcing a service and you second your employees to that organization, then the harassment happens between employees of these two contracting organizations, where there is employer of record. This is like an intermediary. So your employer is actually in the US or UK and you're working in Kenya. So these are the emerging trends that are not addressed, because I think the legislation as far as protections relates to where there's direct employment. There's this indirect employment that we're seeing in this global world that we also need to be considering to extend the protection to, because sexual harassment can equally be cyber, and through all the mediums we use to do work, such as Zoom, Slack, Google Workspace. Sexual harassment can happen there because it can be written, or imagery that you send me, or a photo that you send me. So the considerations around that, there's quite a gray area which we need to be thinking about if we're to be competing as a global workforce in the future.
And a very huge number of Kenyans are now doing work globally. So yeah, that clearly is a place where we need to check. Now, Kate, I'd want you to highlight and I know you have highlighted a bit, but I'd want you to insist on the reporting process. Just tell us, what can you do? Where can you report? What is the process?
Okay, so a good process needs to capture the 5 Ys and 1 H. That's where, when, who, what, when it happened, which. So that investigative process, it should start at that point, and how it happened. So your key to that reporting is the 5 WH questions and the 1H. The protections and confidentiality of how you're handling this process is also important, because fear of reporting is also because what word will go out that I reported someone who I felt violated me, but because somebody didn't experience it as I did, I am the bad person who's leading people to be given warning letters or suspended or terminated. So the integrity of how you handle the investigation internally could also go a long way to encourage reporting. Then try and also disseminate information generally to the organization, so that the grapevine doesn't run wild with misinformation about what was actually going on. So after you conclude your investigations, do communicate to the organization that we had an incident of sexual harassment. This is what the key highlights were. We have zero tolerance to it. Because of it, we took this action. Remind them about your policy, the sexual harassment policy, and the mechanisms that you have in place. And that really goes a long way to communicate your non-tolerance and your action, because that, if anybody was thinking about being a perpetrator, then they'll run away scared. And that's what you want, because the rumor mill does run wild when not communicated appropriately about what is going on. The mamas will be there. Oh, did you hear what happened with this? Did you hear? Hey, did you hear that this led to the termination of that person because somebody couldn't accept compliments? So you need to tame that, and the way to tame that is to communicate around your policy and your stand and the consequences. So that really helps. And after 1 or 2 incidents, believe me, there won't be a third one. So that goes a long way to kind of reinforce those policies and mechanisms that you have in place. So the biggest challenge with reporting is that fear of victimization, fear of being branded the bad person. And if you do want people to be reporting, then that's probably a way you want to address that.
Okay. Well, that is quite, yeah. I hope we are all learning a thing or two. Today I have been schooled thoroughly. No, Kate, in your line, because you've been doing this for some time, are there any therapists? Of course, I know you told me about the NGOs but I mean, any that we know of, the way you go to Kenyatta Hospital and you're told there's this therapist or there's this person who's good. Is there any that is known except for the NGOs where people can or is there a hotline?
So there's a hotline for mental health. I think it's 1109. Allow me to confirm that after, and you can post it with the podcast. But there is a hotline. But this sexual harassment, you probably want to look for a trauma-based therapist. That's the best person, because it's a very traumatic event depending on what your experience was. But a trauma-based therapy is the line I would steer you to, as away from just giving you a specific one. But there's a hotline, and this is managed by the Ministry of Health, by the way, and it works. It works, 1109. So if you call it, they'll probably triage you to see what kind of therapy you need, and I think you will be steered towards a trauma-based therapy or an SGBV psychosocial counselor. Yeah.
So there are systems that are actually working. This is our
They
country.
are.
The systems must work.
They are, and they do work. And there's currently a very big push for mental health So let's make use of these resources. And if you are privileged, because we do have medical covers with our health insurance, now every health insurance must provide a mental health practitioner in their panel. So find out from your medical cover who's your mental health in your panel, and go there. Once you have the first conversation, they will try and steer you to the right person, and this is all covered in your medical insurance.
Yeah, I think I have one more question for you. That is, you who gets this information, because I'm sure you get it first hand raw. Do you ever like also seek support? Because you need to be supported as well mentally, because it feels like dumping, emotional dumping.
Yes. Yeah, we do
You do.
acquire secondary trauma. It's very prevalent, and our body IHRM has actually had a good collaboration with Chiromo Hospital, so we actually have access to that, so we can go and do debrief. And actually, in our organization Nightwise, we also do quite a bit of work in mental health. So I'm surrounded by counselors who I can go and do a debrief to. It's always advisable to do a debrief after you have kind of a session that you feel was heavy on you. So yes, by all means, all HR practitioners should also be doing debriefing sessions.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Kate, the HR profession, I'm seeing a lot of conversations that HR need to look into a few things. I know this is not the episode for that, but
Yes.
when I tie it to this, you know, the way most people say, please, I can't go to our HR. I can't, HR will not help me the way I want. HR is always in support of the other. I mean, do you have a comment on that?
I do actually, and I know my fellow HRs may throw tomatoes. I do know we do get a lot of slander, and as a person, I've also evolved from that HR who was always like a headmistress walking around with a kiboko. It's taken a lot of unlearning, but we really need to be for service to the people. We need to be closer to the people that we serve. That being said, it's a very difficult role because I've found myself in a situation where I'm being pushed from the employer side and the employee side, and I'm in the middle, and it's had a very tough position to be in. So we also do experience a lot of difficult situations, and we fight battles that you will never even know about because we can't come tell you that we fought for a better medical cover. We didn't win, because I don't want to be making the employer look bad and myself look good. So we do find ourselves in very, very difficult situations, but I do feel as practitioners, we do need to make ourselves more accessible by the way we present ourselves, the way we serve the people. That's just my personal opinion. And I will wait for the tomatoes to be thrown at me.
Nobody's throwing you tomatoes. At Corporate Chronicles, we listen to all sides. I don't think they'll throw tomatoes. And if they do, it is a conversation that the HR fraternity needs to have.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do actually, and I'd be looking forward to that conversation to also, maybe paint a picture of what we go through, because we're just labeled as the people who walk around with bottles with, is it spinach in, in the water bottle?
With cucumber and lemon.
Yes,
And
so,
they say nowadays they say that there's a particular perfume that you wear. That just sounds like an angry email. So I don't know what that means. So you guys need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, there's some truth to all these allegations, but unless you have won this heart of what we do, maybe you would extend some grace to us. But it's an interesting conversation that I'd be interested to have as well around all the slander that we get.
Let me be assured that you're gonna come back here. So, Kate, we have come to the end of our recording today for this podcast. But Before we go, what is your parting shot?
Yeah, so my parting shot is a call to action, actually. Please do participate in the survey that you're doing at the moment. You probably have done a survey before, but it's my kind request for you to do just this one. It will take you 3 minutes. We've really broadened the scope because we're trying to reach all the 47 counties and in different sectors to just get a perspective, like the question around which sector is most affected. I couldn't answer that certainly, but do participate in the survey, and Emma will be posting the link to that survey with the podcast. So please participate so that we have some data to take to all the stakeholders who make all the important and relevant decisions so that we are protected as citizens, as workers, because we all deserve a dignified workplace.
Thank you very much. There are some key takeaways that I've gotten from this podcast. It was quite heavy because I need to go and also relook at a few things. But my key takeaways are men are now facing sexual harassment in the workplace. It's no longer a preserve for the women. And Kate also said about prevent to the employer, prevent. To the employee, you deserve a dignified workplace. You deserve to be heard. You're the first line of defense. And when it comes to the legal aspects, there's something that I picked that we need to know about the legal aspects that protect us. The Employment Act, the Sexual Offences Act, OSHA, the Bill of Rights. And do you know why you need to participate in the survey that we are going to post? Because we have a duty to protect ourselves, to protect our children, and to protect our children's children. If you have gone through this issue on a personal level, I empathize. We empathize with you. But as Kate said, there's a lot of support that the government is giving. You could call 1109, is a hotline for Ministry of Health. It's a mental health hotline, and they will direct you where you need to be directed, because we know that you need psychosocial support. Maybe you can also seek a trauma-based therapist, but we empathize with you. And for those who do those things, you need to be delivered. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kate, even for agreeing to sit with us on a day that we're supposed to be planting trees. It's a national duty. Thank you very much. And to our listeners, we see you next time where you get your podcasts from, on Spotify, on AfriPods, on Google Pods, on Apple Pods, on Castbox, and on all our social media pages. So thank you very much. This is Emma, Corporate Chronicles Beyond Suits and Cares. Thank you.